The man at the very top of one of the most powerful music brands in modern hip-hop is sitting in a position right now where the next 18 months might not be about music at all. They might be about lawyers, jurisdictions, and a word that nobody around him ever wanted associated with their name. Rico. Aubrey Drake Graham, the same artist who has spent the last decade selling you the fantasy of OVO as a luxury lifestyle empire, as a record label, as a soft glow brand of owls and gold chains and Toronto winters, is now sitting in the middle of an allegation that does not just question his music. It questions whether the entire infrastructure underneath him has been something else the whole time. And here is the part that should genuinely unsettle even the most die-hard Drake supporter watching this right now. This is no longer one organization being whispered about in connection with OVO. It is now allegedly two. Hell's Angels was the first whisper. G-Way is the second one. And the man delivering the second connection, Trap Lore Ross, is not some random social media account looking for clout. This is a researcher who has spent years building documented timelines and has built a reputation strong enough that his work now triggers reactions across the entire hip-hop commentary space within hours of release. Meanwhile, across the country in Los Angeles, some random artist with absolutely nothing to lose has decided this is the perfect week to walk onto a podcast and announce, with a straight face, that Kendrick Lamar, the man who just turned a surprise album into a triple platinum cultural event, who sold out back-to-back stadium shows at the Rogers Center in Drake's own city, who became the first rapper to do that in Canadian history, somehow needed a publicity stunt to get Los Angeles to listen to him. Two stories dropped in the same week, pointing in completely opposite directions. One man's empire is potentially being investigated as a criminal enterprise. The other man's empire is so threatening to the opposition that they have to invent fake reasons for his success, because the real reasons are unbearable to admit out loud. And when we get to the part of this video where I walk you through the contract architecture under Drake's situation, the publishing structure, and why this Rico conversation is not as crazy as the Drake stans desperately want it to be, you are going to understand why the timing of that Los Angeles publicity stunt narrative is not a coincidence at all. It is a distraction. And we're going to dismantle the entire thing piece by piece. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Let me set this up properly, because there is a lot of moving pieces here, and the only way this story makes sense is if you can see all of them at once. So you have Drake on one side, sitting at the top of OVO Sound, the label, the brand, the lifestyle, the empire that for the better part of 15 years has positioned itself as the polished, business-savvy answer to every chaotic gangster narrative in mainstream hip-hop. He is the Toronto kid who turned acting money into music money, into label money, into real estate money. That has always been the public story. Then, over the last few years, that public story has started to develop cracks. Not loud cracks, not yet, but consistent ones. The Hell's Angels connection that surfaced through the festival incident in Canada with Rick Ross. The laptop sticker that appeared in one of Drake's own social media stories. The reporting around members of his inner circle and their documented criminal histories. Baca Not Nice with a human trafficking case from 2014. Tyshawn Riley known as Greasy Money, whose name Drake has invoked on records demanding his release, while prosecutors have allegedly connected him to multiple murders and attempted murders. None of this is new. None of this is invented. And none of this is being said with hatred. It is being said because it has been publicly reported across multiple outlets over the course of years. Now layer on top of that the moment hip-hop has been living through ever since Not Like Us, a moment where the loudest, most powerful artist in the genre lost the most public lyrical battle in 20 years to Kendrick Lamar and never recovered the cultural high ground. Drake's response to that loss has not been silence. It has been a lawsuit. Multiple lawsuits, actually, including the now famous legal action against his own label, Universal Music Group. And while all of that has been playing out, Drake has been on kick streams teasing an album called Iceman, delaying that album, watching the rollout suffer, watching the singles underperform, and now reportedly delaying Iceman again because, as Trap Lore Ross has alleged in his new work, the first attempt at the rollout simply did not connect the way they needed it to. The reception was not what they wanted. The numbers were not what they wanted. The narrative was not what they wanted. And in the middle of all of that, Trap Lore Ross drops a piece of work alleging that OVO itself is not just a label with some affiliations, but allegedly an entity whose connections to a Toronto street organization called G-Way are sustained, ongoing, and serious enough that a future Rico investigation is not a wild hypothetical. It is a possibility that anyone paying close attention should be considering. The stakes here are not entertainment stakes. They are not chart stakes. They are not even reputation stakes. They are legal stakes, financial stakes, and they are stakes about whether one of the biggest artists of this generation has been operating under a public-facing brand that may not match what is happening behind the scenes. And the question that this entire video is going to answer is simple. When the second allegedly criminal connection gets attached to your name in the same calendar year, when prosecutors have the exact same internet access we do, when the feds can see every story, every lyric, every photo, every public association you have ever posted, at what point does the joke stop being a joke? Let me walk you through what is actually on the table right now, because the surface evidence alone is heavier than people are giving it credit for. Start with the Trap Lore Ross documentary itself. This is not a 5-minute video. This is a long-form investigative piece in which the researcher walks through alleged ties between OVO, members of Drake's inner circle, and a Toronto street organization referred to as G-Way. The documentary lays out names. It lays out timelines. It lays out alleged behavioral patterns. And it does what almost no other hip-hop commentary creator has done at this scale. It actually treats the allegations like an evidence case rather than a meme. The reaction in the space has been immediate. DJ Academics, who has historically been one of the most Drake-friendly major voices on YouTube, watched the documentary on stream and acknowledged the weight of what was being presented. That by itself is a signal, because AK does not break his alignment easily. When even the friendliest mainstream voice has to pause and say, okay, this is heavy, that is a layer 1 piece of evidence that should not be dismissed. The second piece of surface evidence is the Hells Angels connection that has already been hovering over OVO for a long time. The festival incident in Canada, where Rick Ross was reportedly punched by someone allegedly connected to the organization. The laptop sticker visible in one of Drake's own social media posts, a photo he chose to share, a logo he chose to display, an association he chose not to hide. That is not somebody else putting a connection on him. That is a public-facing visual choice that he made himself. And once you have voluntarily attached a logo of an organization with the international criminal reputation of Hells Angels to your own social media feed, you have effectively confirmed the question. The only thing left up for debate is the depth. The third piece of surface evidence is the documented criminal history of people inside the inner circle. Bacchanal Nice signed to OVO with a publicly reported 2014 arrest involving allegations of human trafficking and assault. Drake has not distanced himself from Baca. Baca has appeared on OVO releases, in OVO settings, in OVO branding. That is not a buried association. That is a chosen, sustained on-the-record one. Then you have the public lyrical references to Tyshawn Riley, also known as Greasy Money, whose freedom Drake has openly demanded on records. A man who has reportedly been linked by prosecutors and police to a murder of a bystander, and reportedly connected to up to 6 additional murders and numerous attempted murders. When you put your voice on a record and ask publicly for the freedom of a man being investigated for that, you are not making a neutral statement. You are publicly attaching your influence to his cause. That is a layer 1 fact, not a layer 1 opinion. The fourth piece of surface evidence, the one nobody is connecting properly, is the Iceman situation itself. Drake announced Iceman. Drake started rolling out Iceman. Drake hosted live streams, teased music, built lore, did the entire pre-album theater. And then Iceman got pushed. The reporting around the album now points to a 2026 release window, reportedly May 15, 2026, instead of the original 2025 push. Why does this matter for the Rico conversation? Because the timeline of an album delay during a period of escalating criminal allegation chatter is not unrelated. It is part of the same picture. When the rollout of your biggest commercial project of the year gets reorganized in the same window that a major documentary alleging organizational criminal ties is dropping, that is not a coincidence in scheduling. That is damage control. That is rooms full of people having conversations about exposure. That is a label and a brand recalibrating their public posture because they understand the temperature has shifted. And oh, do I have so much more for you. The Drake stans are not going to like the next part of this video at all. Because the next piece of evidence is not coming from a researcher, not coming from a podcast, not coming from a documentary. It is coming from an LA artist who Drake's own team allegedly tried to recruit twice. From inside the room, with names, with dates, with specific moments. And once you hear what was reportedly said inside OVO's own studio in Calabasas, you're going to understand exactly what kind of operation we are dealing with. And exactly why the publicity stunt narrative they are trying to push on Kendrick this week is the most desperate piece of misdirection we have seen in this entire saga. So let me walk you through what came out of the Lefty Gunplay conversation, because this is the moment where the surface story flips into something much messier underneath. Lefty Gunplay, the Baldwin Park artist who got featured on Kendrick Lamar's GNX album on the track TV Off, sat down with his management team and walked through what reportedly happened in the months after that album dropped. According to the conversation, a producer reportedly reached out from OVO Studios in Calabasas almost immediately after the success of TV Off, pulling Lefty toward a possible Drake collaboration. The management response, again according to Lefty's own account, was that this was reportedly the textbook setup. A direct quote framing the move as a chess play, not a music opportunity. The collab attempt did not happen. Then, reportedly, after the Grammys, where Lefty was on the red carpet thanks to Kendrick's camp giving him the access pass, another OVO-affiliated producer reportedly came back around. This time the alleged ask was even smaller, 4 words. Just 4 words from Lefty, on a Drake project, for the appearance of a cosign. And then, again, the conversation reportedly stalled. The deal never materialized. Lefty turned it down. This is not gossip. This is an artist describing the alleged sequence of events on the record, on a podcast, on video, with his management present. That is layer 2 cultural evidence that does not get more direct than this. And here is what makes that moment matter. Because it is not just about whether Drake wanted a Lefty feature. It is about what the alleged feature was for. The framing from the people closest to Lefty was that this was reportedly an attempt to insert Lefty into the beef as a wedge, not to celebrate his artistry, not to give him a real moment, but to allegedly create a piece of evidence that could be deployed as ammunition against Kendrick. That is the alleged play. That is reportedly the move. And once you see that move clearly, the entire Drake camp behavior over the last 12 months starts to fall into a single pattern. Every collaboration attempt, every olive branch reportedly extended, every soft outreach has reportedly carried a strategic objective underneath it that was never about music. Now layer in the Kendrick side of that same conversation, because this is the part that completely dismantles the Los Angeles publicity stunt narrative. Kendrick Lamar invited Lefty Gunplay onto one of the biggest hip-hop albums of the last decade. He invited him to the Pop Out, the Juneteenth event that has now entered the historical record as one of the most important West Coast hip-hop moments of the modern era. He reportedly facilitated Lefty's access at the Grammys. He led a Baldwin Park artist with a developing career walk onto a global stage. Lefty won a Grammy off TV Off, a Grammy as a featured artist, whose career was elevated from regional respect to international recognition almost overnight. And now there is an LA artist on a podcast somewhere with the audacity to say Kendrick used Lefty as a publicity stunt to get the Latino community to stream the album. Kendrick Lamar's first week numbers on GNX would have been astronomical with or without TV Off. The album was a surprise drop from the biggest active rapper on planet Earth at the height of the most decisive lyrical victory in 20 years. The idea that he needed Lefty Gunplay's hometown to stream a record that the entire world was already preloaded to consume is one of the most embarrassing claims anyone has made about Kendrick in the last calendar year. It is not analysis. It is cope. But it gets worse, because the same artist who made that claim also said reportedly that Kendrick should have given Lefty $10,000 in royalties on top of the feature placement. $10,000. As if a feature on a triple platinum album, plus a stage at the Pop Out, plus access at the Grammys, plus a Grammy win, plus international exposure, plus a career-defining moment, was not enough. Kendrick was also supposed to write a personal check for $10,000 because that is apparently the new ethical standard for collaboration. Meanwhile, the same people pushing that narrative have nothing to say about Drake's own track record. Nothing to say about the dozens of artists who have come through OVO over the years and quietly disappeared. Nothing to say about the rumors of one-sided deal structures, of restrictive contracts, of careers parked in development hell, while the main artist consolidates the spotlight. The selective outrage is the entire tell. When you are willing to publicly criticize the man who just put your friend on the biggest hip-hop album of the year and gave him a Grammy, but you have nothing to say about the man whose own affiliates have been allegedly linked to 2 separate criminal organizations, you are not a neutral observer. You are a participant in a narrative that someone is paying to keep alive. And the cultural evidence keeps stacking. Look at the broader reaction across hip-hop media. Look at the reaction across other artists. Look at the way the conversation has shifted. Even Drake's most loyal stan accounts have been quieter than usual in the last few weeks, not silent, but markedly less aggressive than they were during the original Not Like Us cycle. There is a noticeable cooling. There is a noticeable hedging. There is a noticeable shift in how confidently they engage with these allegations. That is a community-level signal. When the most vocal segment of a fanbase goes from offense to defense, the temperature has shifted whether or not anyone has officially announced it. And then, on the opposite side of the culture, look at what is happening with the Kendrick fanbase. The Rogers Centre Stadium shows in Toronto, a stadium, not an arena, sold out back-to-back, setting a Canadian hip-hop concert revenue record in Drake's own city. 60,000 to 80,000 people singing every word of Not Like Us back to him in the venue that is supposed to be his fortress. That is not a publicity stunt. That is a referendum. And I want to address the counterargument directly before we go further, because anyone honest has to. The Drake camp's defense is reportedly that the inner circle people being named are not officially signed to OVO, that Drake does not control them, that he is not dumb enough to give orders, that the entire Rico conversation is being driven by people who do not understand Canadian law versus American law. Fine. Let us actually engage with that. Yes, the Canadian legal system handles organized crime differently than the American RICO framework. Yes, an actual RICO indictment in the American sense would not happen in Canada. But Drake has homes in the United States. Drake conducts business in the United States. Drake's label is distributed through American infrastructure. And if any alleged criminal activity crosses jurisdictions, through money, through associates, through operations, American prosecutors absolutely have a path to pursue it. The RICO doesn't exist in Canada. Defense is a comforting talking point for people who do not understand how international prosecution works. The reality is that high-profile cases with cross-border elements have always been a path that ambitious prosecutors look at carefully. And speaking of ambitious prosecutors, that brings us to the gear shift this video has been building toward. Now I need everybody to stop and reset, because for the last 12 minutes we have been talking about the surface of this story and the cultural layer of this story. That is the easy part. That is the part every commentary channel can cover. But there is a deeper layer underneath all of this that almost nobody is willing to walk through. And it is the layer that explains why this RICO conversation will not go away no matter how many delays Iceman goes through or how many lawsuits get filed. So let me actually take you into the part of this that requires understanding how the music business actually functions at the top level. Hip-hop has now seen multiple major RICO cases play out in the modern era. Young Thug and YSL was the largest one at the state level in Georgia, not federal, but enormous in scope and visible to every single artist in the genre. Lil Durk has faced his own legal battles. Multiple labels and affiliated organizations have been pulled into prosecutorial reach. And the pattern that has emerged from those cases is the part the public almost never gets explained. Prosecutors do not pursue RICO cases against music figures because they listen to lyrics and get offended. They pursue them because the financial paper trail intersects with the alleged criminal activity in a way that lets them make a case for a single integrated organization. The crime is not the music. The crime is the alleged use of the music business as a vehicle for the proceeds of the alleged criminal organization. That is the actual mechanic. And once you understand that mechanic, you can see exactly why a long-running, well-funded entity like OVO becomes interesting to investigators in a way that a street-level operation would not. Because the financial sophistication is already there, the international structure is already there, the cross-border touchpoints are already there. Everything that makes OVO a successful business operation also makes it potentially attractive to investigators looking for a paper trail. The second systemic angle is the prosecutor incentive layer, and this is the one nobody talks about. Major hip-hop RICO cases are reportedly career-making for the prosecutors who bring them. Notoriety, press coverage, national attention, political leverage, future runs at higher office. These are not anonymous government workers. These are ambitious lawyers who understand that a high-profile case attached to a household name artist puts their name in front of voters and donors. The financial logic of the prosecution side of these cases means that the bigger the artist, the more attractive the target. Drake is the most commercially dominant rapper of his generation. Drake has homes, businesses, and brand affiliations in multiple jurisdictions. Drake's name on a case file is a career-defining piece of paper for any ambitious prosecutor who wants to put themselves on the map. So when people say the feds would never go after Drake, they are misunderstanding the incentive structure entirely. The feds would absolutely go after Drake if the paper trail justified it, because going after Drake would make a career. The third systemic angle is the manufactured narrative ecosystem. The actual reason that LA publicity stunt story dropped this week and not 3 months ago, or 3 months from now. The hip-hop media space is not a neutral observer of these conversations. It is a paid ecosystem. Bloggers reportedly take money. Podcasts reportedly take money. Tabloid accounts reportedly take money. The same conversation that gets framed in one direction on one platform gets framed in the opposite direction on another platform based on who is funding the framing. And the timing of when narratives drop is rarely random. So when a Trap Lore Ross documentary alleging G-Way ties drops, and within days a previously unknown LA artist is on a podcast claiming Kendrick Lamar used Lefty Gunplay as a publicity stunt, and that narrative gets pushed across multiple platforms in a coordinated wave, the question every viewer should be asking is who benefits from that story being on everyone's timeline this week instead of last week or next week. The answer is the people who need attention pulled away from the Rico conversation. The answer is the people who need the Kendrick side of the cultural ledger to feel less unified. The answer is the people whose entire commercial future depends on the narrative not consolidating around the Toronto allegations. That is the engineered part. That is the manufactured part. That is the grift hiding in plain sight underneath the entertainment-level discourse. And once you stack those three systemic layers, the financial paper trail mechanic, the prosecutor incentive structure, and the manufactured media ecosystem, you start to see why this Rico conversation will not stabilize. It is not a momentary scandal. It is a structural pressure point that will keep returning every time a new piece of evidence gets added to the pile. Every new associate exposed. Every new alleged connection surfaced. Every new lyric quoted. Every new lawsuit filed. Every album delay. Every kickstream meltdown. Every desperate publicity push. All of it now feeds into the same underlying question. And the question is no longer, is this beef over? The question is now, what is the actual exposure here? That is a fundamentally different conversation. And it is the conversation that the people protecting Drake do not want anyone to have out loud. Which brings us to the part of this video that I have been building toward from the very first sentence. The truth that nobody in the commercial hip-hop press is willing to say with their full chest. The pattern that connects every single piece of evidence we have walked through today. Here it is. Drake's situation right now is not a music situation. It has not been a music situation for at least the last 12 months. Iceman is not late because of creative decisions. Iceman is late because the people around Drake reportedly understand that releasing a major album into the current media environment, with the documentaries circulating, with the alleged criminal connections being mapped publicly, with the lawsuits in motion, with the cultural narrative consolidating against him, would be commercial suicide. The album is being held because the room is being managed. The rollouts are being recalibrated because the reputational exposure is being recalibrated. The legal team is allegedly running the music release schedule, not the music team. That is what the delays mean. That is what the kickstreams mean. That is what the lawsuit against his own label means. The man at the top of OVO is reportedly no longer making decisions like an artist. He is making decisions like a defendant. And the saddest part is that the public-facing version of him still has to pretend none of it is happening. He still has to post like the brand is healthy. He still has to tease the album like the rollout is normal. He still has to maintain the lifestyle theater while the lawyers do triage in the background. And every single delay, every single legal filing, every single inner circle name surfacing in a documentary makes that performance harder to sustain. The Drake stans believe their guy is going to bounce back with a comeback album. The reality the evidence is pointing toward is that the comeback album was never the actual problem. The actual problem is the exposure underneath the comeback album. And until that exposure stabilizes or fails to stabilize, there is no version of an Iceman release that fixes the larger picture. The brand is not in a creative crisis. The brand is allegedly in a legal crisis being publicly disguised as a creative one. That is the truth. That is what everyone in the comments and on the podcasts and on the blogs is dancing around without ever stating directly. And once you can see it, you cannot unsee it. Meanwhile, and this is the part that gives the entire conversation its emotional weight, Kendrick Lamar is not doing any of this. Kendrick Lamar is not delaying albums. Kendrick Lamar is not filing lawsuits against his own label. Kendrick Lamar is not on kickstreams trying to manage a fragmenting brand narrative. Kendrick Lamar is doing the thing he has done his entire career. He is dropping exceptional music. He is touring. He is breaking records. He is showing up at the pop-out and turning a Juneteenth performance into a permanent cultural artifact. He is putting an artist like Lefty Gunplay on a Grammy-winning track and letting that artist walk away with a career-changing moment. He is selling out back-to-back stadium shows in his rival's home country. He is, in every measurable way, winning, not by going to war every day, but by continuing to be excellent every day. One man is reportedly building his legal defense. The other man is building his catalog. One man is reportedly trying to delay the consequences of his own choices. The other man is being celebrated for choices he made 20 years ago that are still paying dividends today. That is not a coincidence. That is the architecture of integrity versus the architecture of theater, finally getting put on a public scale where the difference becomes impossible to argue. And look, the Kendrick fan base is not perfect. The Kendrick narrative is not perfect. No human being is perfect. But the evidence is the evidence. The man who is winning because he kept his foundation clean enough to survive the storm. The man who is losing because the foundation underneath the brand was reportedly never as solid as the brand itself. That is the story. That is the lesson. That is the part of this entire saga that history is going to remember. The discipline beat the theater. The work beat the noise. The art beat the politics. And it did not even need a publicity stunt to do it, because real ones never do. But this is only the start. The Iceman situation is not going to stay quiet. There will be more delays, more pivots, more strategic releases, more leaks, more kickstream moments, and every single one of them is going to feed back into this larger picture. The legal angle is not going to stay quiet either. There are reportedly more associates whose names are going to surface in the coming months, more documented connections that are going to be mapped publicly, and at least one major piece of investigative reporting that I am personally watching very closely and will be covering on this channel the moment it drops. And then there is the Kendrick side of the ledger, where I am keeping an extremely close eye on what comes next, because the catalog moves he is reportedly setting up for the next 12 months are going to make the GNX cycle look like the warm-up. We are going to be in this conversation every single week for the foreseeable future, and the only way to make sure you do not miss any of the next reveals is to be subscribed right now and have notifications on so that the moment a new piece of this story drops, I can walk you through it the same way we walk through this one. Coming up on this channel next, I am breaking down the actual contract structure inside Drake's lawsuit against Universal Music Group, the part nobody is reading, and walking you through 3 specific clauses that allegedly reveal exactly why this lawsuit is not a music dispute, it is a positioning move, and what it reportedly tells us about what Drake's team believes is coming next. If you thought this video was heavy, the next one is going to rewrite the way you see the entire UMG situation. Hit that next video the second this one ends. You do not want to be the last person in the comments figuring it out.